Here is why. How much of a down payment you are putting on the property that you are purchasing in New Jersey matters in the eyes of the seller. That's one question I received from one of my buyers today, and it's a really valid question. So when you're making an offer on a property, a big chunk of money that goes toward the purchase of the property obviously is down payment. And you often hear it's best to give 20%, 10%. We're not going to dive into that. What I want to let you know is that whatever money you're putting down, your agent is going to divide that number into two unequal parts. Let's say you're putting $100,000 down payment on a $500,000 property. So you're putting exactly 20%, right? Your agent is going to take that $100,000 and divide it into two parts. I would divide it into unequal parts. So let's say $30,000 and $70,000. That first part of $30,000 is going to be submitted to your attorney or to the seller's attorney trust account between 10 to 14 days after you go under contract. So during the transaction, and the remaining balance of $70,000 is going to be delivered at closing together with the closing costs and the mortgage. My client's concern today was, okay, so if the seller is getting all the money at closing anyway, why does it matter to them how much money they are getting as down payment? First of all, the more money you're putting down and the more money you are putting as the first part of the down payment, so-called deposit, that shows the bigger the amount, the more serious you are in the seller's eyes. Why? Let's imagine a situation that you put $30,000 as a deposit, and then in the middle of the transaction you say, I don't want to buy this house anymore, and you just cancel the transaction. Guess what? That money goes to the seller. The seller gets to keep the money. So the bigger this amount is, that shows the seller that the more serious you are as a buyer, right? Because you're not afraid of losing the money. Of course, you have to have a legitimate reason to not to lose the money when you're canceling the deal in the middle of transaction, but this is another topic. And then reason number two is that sometimes, especially in today's market where we have a very strong sellers market in New Jersey, and you buyers take part in the bidding wars, and most of the time you have to outbid your competitors when fighting for a house, chances are the purchase price for that house is going to be much higher than the asking price, which actually very often means that the house is not going to appraise at that higher number. So if the house doesn't appraise, then there is this appraisal gap. Let's say the $500,000 house I was telling you about, you outbid your competitors when purchasing this house and you want to pay $550 for the house. And then the appraiser comes and they say, oh, this house is only worth $525. So somebody has to cover the difference between $525 and $550. So there are four outcomes in this situation. The seller can go down from $550 to $525. You as the buyer can come up with $25,000 cash on the side on top of your deposit, down payment, and your closing costs. You have to cover the difference. So it's extra $25,000 on your part. Or the seller goes down a little bit, the buyer comes up a little bit, and they meet somewhere in the middle, which is the most popular outcome. Or the seller doesn't go down, you as the buyer don't come up, and the deal falls through. But very often it happens, and not many people know about this. If the property doesn't appraise and you are putting a bigger down payment, at least of 20%, the bank who is giving you the mortgage, sometimes they don't send an appraiser, they don't need an appraisal, only because you're putting such a big amount of money as the down payment, especially if you're putting 30 or 40%. I have seen it happen many times with my clients, and the bigger the down payment, the less chances are that the bank is going to do an appraisal at all. Or if the house doesn't appraise, then the lender is able to fold that appraisal gap, that missing amount of money, into your mortgage. So you don't have to come up with extra money. You don't feel it right away. It's going to be incorporated in your mortgage payments. So it's not going to be a lot of money. These are the two most important reasons why it is important in the eyes of the sellers to actually accept an offer with a bigger down payment. Number one, the bigger down payment, the more serious you are in the eyes of the seller. And number two, when the house doesn't appraise, then there is a chance that the lender can incorporate that money into the mortgage. Or if it's a considerably huge amount of money as a down payment, then the bank sometimes doesn't send an appraiser because the appraisal doesn't need to be done and there is no problem with the appraisal gap. That's it.